called Tammy Cowins. She's privileged to what's called the affidavits in support of the wiretaps.
Okay.
It's like 3 affidavits. In those affidavits, it tells Meech's full role. Now, I wasn't allowed to have them because they played this, I'm this kingpin and I'm this killer, and they life in jeopardy.
Right.
In danger.
Right.
That's why they was able to close the courtroom. We'd have been out at Meech. But they played a cold game. I give it to her. And they was playing chess and we was playing chess.
Okay.
Let's talk about Big Meech setting up members from BMF. People don't think this is possible because Big Meech served his entire sentence. Let's look at this new paperwork. There is a man by the name Cuffy Gatlin. He's the former head of the St. Louis chapter of BMF and crucial member of the team. He's currently serving a 27-year sentence for 2 murders and drug trafficking. He claims that Big Meech is the reason he's behind bars. Cuffy and Meech's relationship go back to the 90s. At one point, Cuffy paid $250K for rights to BMF Entertainment. That's movies, books, television, and all of that. That's when Cuffy and 50 Cent's relationship started. The question is, where did everything go wrong? Well, Cuffy claims Meech introduced him to Tammy Cowins, who eventually convinced him to buy 100 kilos of cocaine from a source Meech recommended. Yeah, Meech was still moving coke while he was locked up. He alleges that Tammy was an informant and Meech was aware of this. The deal went south and he was arrested. He alleges that this deal would have got Meech out of jail several years ago, but the evidence from this arrest became inadmissible because Tammy was having an affair with the DEA agent. The evidence was thrown out. This means that Meech was working from inside, and who knows how many Spanish plugs Meech got indicted and deported who can't come forward and tell their story. There has been a plea agreement. On the CCE, Your Honor, there's a mandatory minimum as well. The court, okay, well, all I asked him is if he understands the maximum under the law. There has been a plea agreement between you and the government, right? The defendant, yes. The court, what's your understanding of the agreement? The defendant, that I won't be enhanced. The court, pardon. The defendant, that I couldn't be. The court, well, first of all, what's the sentencing range? The defendant, 30 to life. The court, and that's on the basis of guidelines? The defendant, right. The court, that's a recommended. The defendant, right. The court, and that takes into account your criminal history and the nature of your offenses. The defendant, right. Now that we have reviewed the transcripts of the plea hearing, these are the things that we know from his criminal history points. His guideline range was 30 to life. He made an agreement with the government, and based on that agreement, he would plead guilty. And in exchange, the court would not be able to give him less than 20 years, but the government would agree to seek no more than 30 years. We also learned that there is a provision that would allow for Meech to get more than 30 years, but based on his agreement, that provision was moved. Let's break down what this means. A guidelines range of 30 to life means Meech can get no less than 30 years if convicted. By entering this plea agreement, Meech was turning his minimum of 30 years into his maximum, lowering his minimum down to 20 years. This signifies that Meech made an agreement with the government for a downward departure. If you don't know what a downward departure is, a downward departure is when the federal judge imposes a defendant a sentence that is lower than the minimum sentence that was suggested by the sentence and guidelines. Now, not every downward departure is bad. It usually happens when a judge deviates from the guidelines, because you may have been less involved than others or may have some special circumstances, like a learning disability or something. The judge might just feel the sentence is too steep. But the government agreeing to a downward departure signifies that a defendant has cooperated or assisted them in some way. In this case, Meech had the prosecution helping him.
She used the threat of her life and that I was going to have some hitmen in the federal courtroom to kill her. And they closed the courtroom to the media. My shit standing room only. I'm that dude in that city, homie.
Right.
I'm that dude in that city.
Right.
So that's why they ain't been came out. But the affidavits in support of the wiretap, she has them.
So she can get them for sure.
If she got them.
Okay.
She got them. The only person they barred from having the documents was me.
Okay. So you the only one that don't got the information.
Right.
Gotcha.
Everybody else, it's called discovery. Everybody else got the packet.
The prosecution are playing games. They're making sure they make the deals. Don't speak on it during the court so that it's not on record. Therefore, they can continue to use the defendant while he's in the feds to continue to make plays and not be exposed as a rat. This is what they're doing, you guys. Meech didn't only tell on his partner, Cuffy, but he also allowed Tammy to be exposed as a rat to protect his image. That's why she turned on Meech, and it backfired, because once she found out that she was exposed, she exposed the paperwork to Cuffy's attorney. That's what she did. Now he also snitched on his brother and allowed his agreement to allow his brother to take the rap as the head of BMF, and Meech only being accused by association. According to the investigation, in this case, Meech and Terry were identified as the two heads of this organization. Meech did not only admit to his role, but he also agreed he supervised 5 people named in the conspiracy, and that at least 3 transactions he was directly involved in. This meant that 5 people who were under Meech, who had not yet taken plea deals, were at risk of having evidence presented that they were identified by Meech if they went to trial. Among those people who were still waiting to go to trial at the time were Meech's brother, Terry Wayne Joyner, Brian Garrett, and Kim Williams. Based on Meech's deal, if T went to trial, Meech's word could be used against his brother and others. The only way to avoid that was to convince T himself to take a plea deal. By pleading out T would essentially be incriminating his connect, admitting that whatever they had against him connecting him to T was valid. And Meech's lawyer wanted Meech to get credit for all of that. The era in which Big Meech took his plea represents a change of times, where it was once frowned upon to take a plea deal in conspiracy cases. More and more people started to do it under the premise that they were just taking their own weight. And the government was working diligently to find ways to conceal the fact that this meant they were cooperating, not just to protect them, but also to keep more people willing to do so. How could one argue that it was wrong when you had certified street bosses like Big Meech doing it and being allowed to walk the yard of the USB compound openly? Most people look at plea deals, and the first thing they look for in terms of cooperation are Rule 35 motions or 5K1 motions. Those are not the only methods of being rewarded for cooperating. One non-traditional way of rewarding cooperation is a Rule 11C1C plea agreement. Many attorneys recognize and practice this method because it allows them to negotiate a reward with the government. This is a safer method for clients than simply cooperating and leaving it up to the judge whether they did enough to get a Rule 35 or 5K1 motion. And yes, Big Meech did have a Rule 11 C1C plea agreement. Even more telling of the fact that Meech had negotiated a downward departure was the fact that in his Pro Se 2255 motion filed in 2009, he stated that his lawyer had promised him that he would only get 20 years. Meech also took this opportunity to pretty much blame everything that was going on his brother, denying any involvement and saying that if he was guilty of anything, it was just being the brother of Terry Flyery with a guidelines ranging 30 years to life. Why would Meech be expecting less than 30? Because Big Meech had this plea agreement already locked in since 2007. He didn't have to sign a new agreement or create new terms once Tammy came along. He just needed her to work. 2012 Big Meech, who had a plea agreement since his business partner and life rights owner, Tammy Cowins, who was also a confidential informant, contacted the DEA about an arrangement Meech had with his friend Cuffy Gatlin. Tammy documented the calls to add credibility to her information, leading to Cuffy's indictment. When Tammy's identity as the confidential source was exposed, she became upset with her FBI handlers and contacted Meech, who did not want his name involved. Tammy then contacted Cuffy's attorney, revealing the agent's practices, leading to a motion to suppress the information.
Educational purposes only. Please respect the views and opinions of this channel. All accusations and/or opinions are alleged on this channel. All names are alleged obtained from public social media websites. Please respect the channel and its channel holders. And again, all names, accusations are alleged. Thank you for your support.
Omegadrip exclusives.